Hey you guys, we are excited to share with you some very exciting news. We have created an online training platform that you can do in the palm of your hand.
With over 20 modules and nearly 80 lessons, this is the most comprehensive and detailed scalp micropigmentation course out there.
For those of you who can't travel here, maybe you're in other countries, you can now learn from your computer, you can sit at home, you can sit in a bus, and you can learn scalp micropigmentation with the greatest innovators in this industry.
Want to learn more? Click the link below.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Scalp Solutions Podcast. I am your host, David Santiago, and today I have with me, Taryn Quinterri. What's up, Taryn?
How you doing?
I am doing great. Thank you for taking out some time from your busy schedule to jump on the podcast and chop it up with us.
You bet.
So check this out. I want to get right to it, all right? Because I know we're going to be spitting out some rapid fire stuff. I know that you're not going to hold back any information that I ask you. So I got to capitalize. I got to take advantage of this moment, okay? So first off, just let us know where you're from and what's the name of your clinic, Taryn.
I'm from Phoenix, Arizona. My clinic is Cosmetic Aesthetics. I actually started it in Miami, but then I moved back to the West Coast. I was in Miami for about 7 years, and then I moved back.
So you're originally from Phoenix, went to Miami, and then came back to Phoenix.
Actually, then I went back to San Francisco. I moved to San Francisco for a few years, and then back to Phoenix. So I was gone for about 10 years, then I came home.
Interesting. That's a big change, going Miami back to Phoenix. And don't attack me. I don't know everything I need to know about Phoenix, but I was there for like 3 days and I was just kind of like, interesting. I don't know if I can live here.
Yeah, well, I think it's one of those things like so it's a big hub now and I love to travel. Like I cannot not travel. And so now that it's such a big hub, like we're close to so many things. You know, I want to pop over to Mexico, boom, right there. I want to go to the beach, boom, California's right there. I want to go to Vegas, boom, it's right there. You know, like we're kind of central. And now that it's become such a bigger city, like I'm a foodie, I would never have moved back if the food culture hadn't grown. But it was a really good business move for me. Like I grew up here, you know what I mean? It's just so easy to run a business, not to mention zero regulations. So like after living like in California, where I had to pay thousands and thousands of dollars just to have like an establishment license and all the things, you know, here it's like nobody even knows I exist. Nobody cares. You know what I mean? Like I follow regulations that don't exist here, but no one's going to get me in trouble. There's no law. Like it's very easy to run a business.
Interesting. So you guys are able to run rampant like they do in New York.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yep. That can be a good and it can be a bad thing, as we both know. It's bad
if you're like a person going to get a tattoo and you have no idea about, you know, bloodborne pathogens, and then the tattoo artist doesn't know. And yeah, that can be very bad because we're not regulated. Also, anybody can become an artist. You could just buy a tattoo machine off Amazon. No one's going to stop you. No one cares if you had any training, but it's good for if you do have all the training and you do things right and you just don't want to be bothered by no government crap, you know, pay this just to have this, and they don't know anything about tattooing. They just want your money.
I listen to the New Jersey artists and what they got to go through, and it's like, oh my goodness, like they make them even for SMP, which in New York we've been able to finesse it, you know, even for insurance purposes, because I almost got caught to it, and I was just like, oh, I do scalp micropigmentation. You know, you want to be all professional about it. Oh, what is scalp micropigmentation? And then you tell them, and they're like, oh, it's $2,500, and I'm like, man, but like, a tattoo artist pays $1,100, and then you start really thinking about it. It's like, well, essentially what I'm doing is a tattoo. So let me not try to be all extra with it. But in New Jersey, they make them do like a 60-hour, like a PMU course where they got to pay like $7,000 and all this. So essentially on top of training, which it could be anywhere from $4,000 to $5,000, you're paying an additional anywhere from like $6,000 to $10,000 just to get the basic, you know, requirements so that you can, you know, work as a solo studio. All right. So I got a quick question that just came up. This has nothing. I don't even have this written down, but you said since Phoenix is like a free for all, how many SMP artists you got around you that had they're YouTube SMP artists? Are there any of them? You don't have to put them on blast.
You know what, David? I actually kind of took a step back from giving a fuck. I hope I'm allowed to say fuck. I'm Italian.
Absolutely. Capital F.
I don't even know. Like, I don't care. competition to me is nothing. I hope we all win. I hope you're being safe. I hope your clients are safe. I educate my clients, you know, of what to look for if you're getting any kind of tattoo, you know, like just make sure they're wrapping their machines, ask them if they have a bloodborne pathogen exam, you know, stuff like that. So I don't know. I don't do my research. People are like, oh, don't you know the competition and your statistics and how you're ranking on Google? No, I don't, because I do fine. I don't care. Like, I just don't, I don't know.
Awesome.
I found myself caring too much. When I used to know that stuff, it would bother me. Now that I'm in my own little bubble, nothing bothers me. I'm peaceful. I'm happy.
I could appreciate that. I actually love that. All right, cool. So let's backtrack now. Taryn, how long have you been in the SMP industry?
Almost 10 years. It'll be 10 years in September since I opened up my LLC.
10 years. So you have seen some evolution going on in the industry.
Yeah, my journey is interesting. I started with using like permanent makeup ink. I trained SMP in Israel with somebody named Moshe Alul from a company called NPM. That was back in 2012. And maybe beginning of 2013, somewhere around there. And then Bryce Cleveland from Scalp Aesthetics found me on Instagram because I was hashtagging. This is when Instagram was brand new. He found me on Instagram because he's a marketing genius, and I was hashtagging SMP, or I think I was hashtagging like scalp micropigmentation or follicle stimulation or something. I'm sorry, scalp trickle pigmentation. I don't think I was calling it SMP back then. And he found me, and then, you know, he flew to me, did the whole business proposal. I opened up his second and third locations ever, one in Miami and one in Palm Beach. So that's how I got started. Then few years later, I was in Italy taking a brow course from Tony Belfalto, saw that one of his employees who was handing out our booklets had SMP, and I was like, where'd you get that done? And he was like, Tony did it. And it was the best job I'd ever seen. Moshe's work was a joke. Scalp is, you know, whatever. Not gonna even say anything there, but Tony's was incredible. So I actually flew him to America. I hosted the first ever like large scalp, it was trickle pigmentation at the time, training, because this was going back to cosmetic ink. So I went from cosmetic ink to carbon, back to cosmetic ink, and I've been through a lot. And then I went back to carbon, and now I use both, and it depends on the client. But yeah, I hosted the first ever class back in 2014, flying Tony here. Tony taught it, but I hosted it.
Outstanding. So now, like I said, you have seen some serious evolution going on with the industry, going from like the technique that you initially started with, right? Which was your basic traditional, just simple impressions, not going too dark or saturated. There's so many different styles. You got barbers coming in, you got freaking doctors coming in, dentists, everybody's coming in. They're leaving their industry because they see how lucrative, you know, SMP can be. Now, when you started your journey in SMP, did you ever imagine that it would evolve to what it is current time?
Yeah, I absolutely did. And the reason why is because I watched the eyebrow thing do it, microblading, you know, because permanent makeup has existed for so long. And what a lot of people don't know is so has scalp micropigmentation. Like what I was introduced to scalp micropigmentation, the reason I went to Israel in the first place was, I trained with Moshe in the first place, was because in my skincare, I went to school for skincare back in 2012. And in my school, they had a book of like areolas, eyebrows, and I had never seen the areolas or any of the like medical side of it. And I saw a hair transplant scar done by somebody. And this was a 24-year-old, now it's a 24-year-old book. It was an old book at the time.
Wow, okay.
So it has existed for a long time. But yeah, I have seen a whole lot of things, a whole lot of changes, needles, inks, you know, styles, everything.
So
I'm gonna grab my
you
AirPods. You can keep talking. Hold on, I'm gonna grab my AirPods.
go right ahead. Hey, you could keep talking. I'm gonna put on my ear.
Well, I'm listening.
No, so like you've seen a bunch of different techniques, different pigments, different needles. My question to you, and I don't know, I know I don't need to tell you that I'd like for you to be transparent because I know that's your style. I'm pretty sure anyone that knows you knows that you don't hold back. Are you for the change, or do you feel like the industry's losing its foundational like efforts?
No, actually, I'm all for change. I'm a big believer in like there are multiple ways of doing things. Like kind of when I talk to my students, sometimes when I train my students are like, well, why did this guy? Cause sometimes I'll train students who have already trained, you know, and they're like, oh, well, I mean, this guy said that, you know, we could get it done in like 2 sessions. And I'm like, well, good for them. You know, that's awesome. There's a style of SMP that in my mind doesn't look as natural, but the cool thing is that people have made it a cool thing. Like, yo, I just got my SMP done, check it out. Like, you know, you can see it from a mile away, but that's cool. If it's cool, it's cool. It looks awesome. There's nothing wrong with it. And then there's my clients who don't even want to tell their freaking sister or their brother or their parents. You know what I mean? Like, you can't see that shit. And then people make fun of me. People like, oh, she takes like 4 sessions, sometimes 5. Like, you know, screw that. And like, we make fun of each other, but we're all friends. You know, it's just we have different ways of doing things. And I don't, like I said before, like I don't really care about competition. I hope we all win. I do hope that, I mean, there's people out there doing $200 eyebrows, you know, and I'm charging $800. There's people out there charging $1,500. So I guess I hope that the SMP doesn't get like devalued, you know, like people think they can just get it done free, but there's always going to be those clients that do their research and that are willing to pay more for better work. So even if a bunch of people are out there doing, you know, $500 scalps, like that's on you. If you want to make $3 an hour, that's on you, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Right? You want to come back with botch work, that's on you. Because I was gonna say, there's already, at least I know, you know, where I'm at on the East Coast. We have some artists doing it for $300. But I usually get them when they come back for the second session, and they're like, "Is there anything you could do for me?"
Yeah,
like, here, go to Steve on 43rd. He'll laser remove from you. All right, got you. So, with all that, you're accepted of the change, but you've found, and from what I see, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, you've took a niche industry and you've kind of like really been vocal when it comes to color theory.
I have, and that's all a part of the, you know, you mentioned change. That's all a part of it. Like even me, myself, I try to redo my color theory webinar that I have all the time because I'm still changing. Like I have gone from using iron oxides, so inorganic, cosmetic ink, whatever you want to call it, to carbon. I went back to iron oxides, and then I went back to carbon, and now I use both, and I find needs for both. Like I personally do not like doing hair transplant scars with carbon. I don't like the way it looks long term. So now I'm back to using, sometimes I'll use carbon on their head and I'll use iron oxide on their scars. And I mean, it's just, so I'm still evolving. I think it's an ever evolving thing, but I am a very firm believer in understanding that you shouldn't be using carbon on everybody. I mean, there are some redheads that have major cool undertones. When you look at like I call it the cul-de-sac or the horseshoe, the hair that they still have, sometimes even though they're a redhead, they'll have like these, you know, blue, like natural hues of when they shave their head, we see the hair growing underneath the skin, right? We're looking at this like reflection. And then there's other redheads that don't present that at all, in which case I wouldn't want to have any cool hues in my inks. But then that other one that did have cool hues, I will use carbon on him, because guess what? We need it to look cool to match with his already existing hair. So there's just scenarios for everything that I do, but I do believe that you shouldn't just use carbon black on everybody, especially like blondes and redheads. Like, you know, more often than not, it's not going to look good. It's going to look blue.
Got it. So before we dive into the reasons as to why, can you just explain to us what is the difference between an iron oxide versus a carbon-based pigment?
Sure. So this is a topic that really confuses people. It took myself quite a while. Like I was always a little color nerd of, you know, I loved science and math and art. Like I was that kind of nerd, and it took me a while to really comprehend it, and because it's kind of confusing. Like whoever came up with this terminology is kind of an asshole. So they call carbon organic, okay, which a carbon in a sense is organic if you think of the fact that like it used to be dinosaurs, right? So, okay, it's organic, but carbon inks are synthetically made in a lab. Like they take the carbon and they do some shit to it. So in my mind, that's inorganic, right? Organic. Like when you think of like food, right? We think of food, organic, inorganic. So the iron oxides, those are natural, you know, substances. They're irons, they're ores, you know, metal oxides, salt, whatever. And so those in my mind are organic, but they're called inorganic. And so it's very confusing. And then there, you know, there's clients out there, because my students will be like, well, like, what if I, you know, my client asks if I'm using organic ink? Because there are people that, you know, they're like, they want to be all natural and organic, and they only use natural soap and all the things. Well, I mean, good luck trying to explain that to them. They're going to have to sit down and really like read a book, you know, if you want to put that on your website. So, I mean, I just try to make it very simple. Like, what, it's not the same as food. Yes, I'm using, or you can just say yes, honestly. They're never going to know the difference. Yeah, I'm using organics, because you could argue
It's
that
organic.
yeah, exactly.
It's like it's
Right.
organic.
You could argue that the iron oxides are organic, because they're natural. But if you look it up on Google, it's interesting. Google has two answers. In a certain section, Google will say carbon is organic. But then if you talk about carbon ink, it will, it will say carbon is inorganic. And then if you mention carbon ink, it'll say it's organic. It's confusing. I mean, it's a lot. But basically, carbon is stronger. It is not biocompatible with our body's immune system. So our body cannot break it up. Whereas iron oxides can be broken down over time with our body's immune system. They are sociable or biocompatible with our body.
Got it. So now another big question, and I know once anyone listens to this, because this is also for me. I need to know this too. How do I even identify if I'm purchasing an iron oxide pigment or if I'm purchasing a carbon? I know the carbons, they always like, oh, this is a carbon base, but I see this, I hear you talking like that, I hear Stevie G, I see in the forums, and I'll tell you, I'll be 100% transparent. I'm still trying to wrap myself like, what's right? What's right? How am I identifying this? Like, all I'm seeing is this person saying, I use this, I'm getting great results, blah, blah, blah. It's an iron oxide. And then I go on nerd mode and I'm like, it doesn't say anywhere that this is a carbon ink. It doesn't say anywhere that this is an iron oxide.
Ideally, it would be ideal if they said, you know, organic, inorganic. But actually, like, so Steven, for example, Stevie G, he is coming out with a line that I'm really excited for, because we've been in this journey together. We started together back in 2012. And so iron oxides, they age warm. So when they start to fade over time, they fade to like warmer colors if they're done correctly and put at the proper depth. Whereas, oh my gosh, hold on. Hi.
We'll go back real quick, right? We just had
so Stevie G's pigment that I think, yeah. So he's coming out with a line that's going to be a hybrid. So it's going to be inorganic and organic. And the idea behind that, because so carbon ages cool, like over time. That's why I always tell my clients, if people come in, if they've done their research, like, can my head turn blue? If they're a white person, I'm like, absolutely. But it's all about knowing what can happen if and when it does. The reason anyone's head can turn blue, no matter how good the ink, no matter if you modify it, which I do, I try to prevent it from happening. As we get older, I'm talking about white people, our skin changes colors. We get more translucent. We can see the veins in our hands more the older we get. Therefore, whatever ink is inside of us is going to reflect differently over time. Also, if you've ever looked at body tattoos, say somebody has a rainbow tattooed, guess what colors go first? Even though body tattoos are carbon ink, the yellow and the orange, the sun breaks them down. Okay, they disappear. You need touch-ups on those colors more often. The purples and the blues and the greens, those remain because those are strong carbons, which is carbon black is the strongest carbon. So his theory is that by making a hybrid, so iron oxides age warm, carbons age cool, boom, what do you think is gonna happen? They're gonna age neutral. That's the plan. That's the idea. I'm super excited for it. People have started it with brows a couple of years ago. People started doing the hybrid. So I'm really excited.
Yeah, we I spoke with I interviewed Stevie G a few weeks ago, and he told me about it. He was like, don't let this podcast come out before I speak at the Scalp show or I'll kill you. I was like, say no more. We'll wait till after, because he spoke about, you know, I attacked him too for it, because even when I met him, you know, at the expo, and I wanted to have the same conversation with you, but you like did the ninja vanish, because I was like, listen, I'm on a mission. I know I'm here to host, but I have this one thing. I mean, I've only been doing this for 4.5 years, but I'm like, man, I can't wrap myself around the color theory. And it kind of pisses me off, because not many people know this. Coming up, like, I wanted to be a cartoonist, so I understand.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I understand art. I understand the color wheel. So I understand in theory how these things make sense, but to see it, like, I need to see it. Like, break it down for me, Barney style. So that being said, you said yourself you use modifier. That's become the thing now. I see people using the orange modifier for every single client. In your professional opinion, do they know what they're doing, or are they just going along with a trend? What's happening?
They're going along with the trend. I mean, and I could say it's partially my fault, probably, but I mean, for the longest time, our best knowledge was from experience and what we were taught. Like my color theory came from brows, right? Understanding brow color theory. But even that is evolving, right? So people are getting deeper and deeper into it. And the thing with scalps is, so I don't just use an orange. I have like a brick reddish color and an orange. Those are my main go-tos for modifying. But I also mix in other colors. Like I won't even use carbon black if I'm working on a blonde or a redhead. I use like browns, carbon browns, if you will, which have a smidgen of carbon black in them.
You made a video maybe like 2 years ago. I have that. If I showed you my phone, I got you got your own notes section so where I've tried to put this. And listen, I'm transparent. I know some like they don't want to give another artist like the appreciation. They're like, hey, listen, you've helped me. I have a legit where it's like it says Taryn and it says color. You know, when you go on these like color rants on the forums, I'm like, copy and paste. Yeah. I'm gonna read that later.
That's good. You're doing your homework. Yeah.
Because awesome. I don't want to be that guy, but I'm still that guy, Taryn, because I'm not getting it.
Well,
so this is why I'm
asking. Let me tell you, David, it's about to get a lot more complicated. So basically what I was saying is like, I've been using like kind of a red and orange for a long time, as well as some other colors. And basically what Steven does only scalps. I mean, his lady does everything like me. I do everything. I don't just do only scalps. I do maybe like 3 a month, you know, like I don't do a ton of scalps. I know them very well. I know the science, I know the technique, you know, I'm very particular. I work on a lot of long hair, a lot of hard cases, whatever, but I don't do it all the time. So he has a lot more experience at this point because he's only doing that. And so he's been testing out this color knowledge. And then his current lady is a freaking genius. She's like, oh my God, I would marry her. She's a little molecule nerd. I mean, she breaks it down to a science. And so what I had discovered myself is like, okay, even the orange and red sometimes is not enough. Sometimes it's still healing blue. Why? I can't figure it out. I'm just gonna add a bunch of more orange. No, now that looks too light. It's not even gonna stay in the skin, you know? So I hadn't had any real answers to that. And apparently, and he said, I'm gonna be the first person to get his color theory webinar, and I'll be coming out with one too.
Hey, I got bribed with that too. I got bribed with that too. Stevie G, you better watch out, man. You said I was first. Nah.
Oh, that's funny. So he apparently has figured some things out, and basically what it comes down to, I mean, I understand it. He briefly explained it to me, and it's like an orange and a red isn't going to work for everybody, because that would work if everybody was super white, but there's different versions of white people, there's different versions of tans, and there's you know, there's got to be more colors to it. Like he was giving me he's like, I'm even putting, you know, I put purple in there. I don't know which kind of purple. I'm thinking it's probably not like a purple. It's probably like I don't know, I'm assuming like a maroonish violet, like who knows, something like that. But and I'm like, okay, well, I got to wrap my brain around that for a second. But I'm like thinking like, what kind of person would he put purple in? And then I'm like, Asians. Yeah, Asians are yellow. They're right. I'm like, that's okay. That makes sense. Like, you know, so apparently he's broken it down to a science. What I will tell you right now, you know, Steven and I worked together for 8 years. Our brains speak two completely different languages. He makes things very complicated, but for people who like that, people who like the big words and the exact descriptions and, you know, like stuff like that, those are the people who are going to take his color theory webinar. I'm going to take it, and then he's probably going to have to reteach it to me on the side, hop on a phone call and explain it to me in dumb people talk, because then I'm going to take my webinar and I'm going to make it out
Barney
more
style.
Simple. Because,
Barney style for guys like me.
Exactly. Like you know, so we have two very different styles of teaching. So you know, he's like, I'm coming out with a webinar. I got to do it. And I'm like, that's fine. That's great. I'm not tripping. Like, our webinars will still be completely different, you know, but I am excited for his pigments. I'm very excited.
Yeah, that's dope. No, so like, again, you know, like I said, you've took a niche, right? Because our industry, you know, it's a niche. I've been corrected several times. I'm like, listen, that's how we say it in the Bronx. It's a niche.
That's how I say it.
A niche. I know it's like, it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a buddy of mine. He was like, you know, I'm gonna tell you something, Dave. You know, you good. I love what you do as a business, but you're very successful. He was like, but you say something, and I hear you say it all the time, and it just drives me nuts. And he goes, ever since I moved to Canada, this is, you know, they've been correcting me. And he goes, brother, it's not niche, it's niche. And I just looked at him. I was like, wow. Okay.
Tomato.
Yeah, it's like that. All right. So as I was saying, you've managed to take such a niche, you know, industry, and you've narrowed it down like to the color theory. And I almost don't even want to ask the question, but I'm forced to ask these Barney style questions because the majority of the people that listen to the podcast are fairly new artists. And I know when I was coming up, like, it was unheard of. Like, no, you just use carbon and you diluted it and you figured it out. And if you had to do 4 sessions, you did 4. If you had to do 5, but now everyone is just mixing, and now there's a green and there's another one that you mix with it. I just want you to elaborate on the actual importance of understanding the color theory. And do we genuinely need to know it? Because for years, right? And I'm posing this question to you because you've been in the game for 10 years. So I know in the very beginning, it was just straight up carbon or whatever it was, an iron oxide black. There was no mixing, and you guys survived for several years. But now it's kind of like, all right, well, you have to just, why is it so important?
When I first started, actually, so with NPM, with Moshe Alul, he was using iron oxides, and they were pre-mixed colors. So they weren't like just iron oxide black. He had, you know, he had a scalp red, he had a scalp light brown, he had all these different colors. But even he didn't really understand what he was doing sometimes, because a lot of his stuff was looking blue, and then sometimes it wasn't. And then I got with Bryce, and Bryce, of course, sold me the whole, like, this will never turn blue. So I, you know, hopped on to just he had a pre-mixed, he had 3 colors, light, medium, dark. And I swear to God, that some of my clients from back then, they look amazing today. And then most of them are blue, but like a few of them look great. So carbon will work on some people, right? So, and then when I got with Tony had pre-mixed iron oxides as well. He had like a black, a light black, a brown, and a medium brown, I think. I don't think Tony ever had any red or blonde colors. I don't think he did them. Maybe he did. I don't remember. But he's in Italy. I mean, they all got dark hair anyway, you know, so that's not true. There's a lot of blonde haired Italian people, but not where he's at. So, and then I kind of went back to carbon because of how I mean, SMP exploded, and people were just carbon. And I was seeing other people's results, and I was like, and then what actually happened, the reason I went back to carbon was because when I first moved back to Arizona from Miami and then from San Francisco, my iron oxide was fading within like 6 months. They were coming back needing a touch up. Now, you spend a lot of money on trickle pigmentation is what it's called when we use iron oxide. So to have to be spending that money every 6 months was just not okay. And so I was like, all right, I need to go back to carbon. So that's why I am excited for this like hybrid line, because I mean, some of my carbon, I'm not liking it. Sometimes I love it. So the industry is still changing. But what I will say is super, super important, and people don't understand it, is, okay, if we mess up, and I don't mean me, you know, we all mess up from time to time, sure, whatever. I mean, like, newbies, okay? Newbies are gonna mess up. We all did. They're gonna go too deep. They're gonna have blowouts. They're gonna have some, you know, whatever. If they start out with color, it's a little concerning depending whose color they're using, because carbon black comes out with laser the easiest, easier than any other color, okay? Yellow doesn't come out. So if you have yellow inside of what? Orange, right? So there's yellows inside of a lot of browns, okay? So if you mess up and you then need laser, and you've got a yellow from a company that maybe isn't like hasn't been around long enough. Like I use LI pigments. Why? They've been around for 30 years. They know what's up. They know the changes that the industry goes through. So they're using colors that are safe. They're red, for example. Red is there's a red molecule in specific that people tend to have allergies to in body art, like roses. There's a certain color that people use for rose red. People have allergies to red. It's pretty common. I shouldn't say very common. LI won't use that molecule, you know, like, so with these people coming out with oranges and just, oh, here you go, you use my orange. Like, do you know what yellow molecule you're using? Do you know how laser is going to react with that? Because let me tell you, laser can make a yellow look fucking neon, like highlighter.
I was going to ask that because, you know, having the relationship that I have now with the people that do laser, you know, when I went down to their office, they were showing me, because they were asking me, they was like, yo, Dave, what kind of pigment do you use? So I showed them and they're like, this is interesting because this is this carbon. And they're like, are you mixing it with anything? And I'm like, no. And they're like, all right, well, they're trying to, you know, they're trying to do like the process of elimination. And these are not clients that I sent. It's just, I sent them to them, like, get your laser first. And he was showing me pictures. There was some of them that it even looked like purple. So I was like, wait, the SMP went from looking kind of like a bluish tint, like now it looks purple.
Well, and the purple is probably, so the purple is probably somebody who thought, who maybe heard, you know, on the grapevine, probably from my webinar or something, passed along the way, that you should put red in certain, like when you're trying to achieve black, you don't add orange because orange will turn black brown. So you add red, right? So they probably just used any old red, which red and black, if you take paint, you mix them together, that makes purple. Okay. So you got to use like a brick red, like a brownish red, like a, you know, so you can just use any red. So, and then, I mean, and then you got, you know, some people just, it's less common, but some people, if you put carbon black into some people, they will look purple naturally. Like their natural undertones are purple. I've got tons of examples in my webinar, like my clients, like and it's okay if their natural undertones are that. And when you, like I was saying with that redhead, when you shave their skin, if you can see like a blue shadow with their natural hair that's growing in that horseshoe or cul-de-sac, whatever you want to call it, then it's okay. Their ink, if you use carbon black, is probably going to look that color, and that's okay as long as it's not blatantly blue or blatantly purple.
Got you. Now, in regards to like the coloring, right? I spoke with and I want to bring this up because I'm going to bring it up on my phone because I want to read it from the actual internet, right? I spoke with a hair surgeon, a hair transplant surgeon that I've developed a relationship with, and he's super transparent with me. And I asked him, you know, how do you guys go about explaining when a man shaves his face or when they shave their head? Sometimes it gives off like a green undertone or a blue undertone naturally. Like, can you arm me with something so that I can explain it during my consultation, where it's kind of like, well, you see your natural hair, when we buzz it down, it already looks cool, right? You have blue undertones. I don't want to just tell them that. I want to be able to like really go to a whole other level with it to help me separate myself from every other artist, because they're going to be like, damn, this guy just gave me this elaborate explanation. And what he told me was, it was very simple. He said, it's called the Tyndall effect. Have you ever heard of that?
I have not. There's a hair transplant surgeon that said that?
Yes. And I'm going to show you right now, is actually, it's a thing. It's a scientific thing, right? It's a Tyndall effect. And I'll tell you right now what it is. The Tyndall effect, also called the Tyndall phenomenon, it's the scattering of a beam of light by a medium containing small suspended particles. So for example, smoke or dust in a room, which is made visible by a light beam entering through the window. So that's what they use to describe our eye receiving.
So I could see Steven saying that, because that's complicated. My brain's like, what? Like, but I get it. So the way that I explain it is that our body has natural undertones. One of the things I look at is I look at people's under their eyes. We've all got veins there, right? The veins in our hands and arms might look different than the ones under our eyes. So when you're working on a canvas, you want to look for undertones near your canvas, right? So, but skin is like a filter that light passes through. So think of it like a camera, right? Like it's a lens. And so you've got your hair growing underneath, which hair doesn't grow 90 degrees. If it did, it might reflect differently. It might actually look like little dots, but hair grows out, you know, at an angle. And so when we shave that hair, we see something reflecting through our filter. Our skin is a filter, and you know, we're all made up differently. We come from different places, and I don't know the exact answers. I explain it more simple, you know. I just know that like our skin is a filter, and everybody is different. We're not all the same, so we're gonna reflect things differently. Also, different color hair. If you've got, you know, deep red hair that comes through, then your skin's gonna reflect different. And then if you have alopecia totalis, guess what? You're not gonna know. You're not gonna know. You just got to do a test patch and let it heal and see, you know, because they don't have any hair to reflect anything. But you can get an idea of their undertones by looking at their veins. You can also look at the veins behind their ears. Where a lot of people get confused is sometimes people have like kind of a reddish, like flushed skin going on, and that's an overtone. You know, that's their skin. That's not like their actual veins. It's just some people call what is it called? Rusty, I think is a term in like the permanent makeup world. There's a term for it when they're all flushed out and look red, but they're not actually something like that.
Hey, you got a rusty face. I'm
blanking out on it, but something like that.
Got you. So now you also offer a you have online course or webinar in color theory. Can you talk to us about that? Because I know people are gonna hear this and they're gonna go, hold up, you just teased me. I thought I was getting a free freaking color theory masterclass, but you only had her on for like about 45 minutes. Where's the rest of the information? Can you just let them know where they can go to get that course and, you know, price and all that?
Absolutely. Yep. So the price is $350. It comes with ongoing support from me. Once it's yours to keep it. You can watch it as much as you want, whenever you want. It comes with an index. So it's got, the index has all the topics listed and the exact times that I begin talking about each topic. So once they've watched it, let's say they want to go back and like, oh, let me go to the part where she talks about redheads. Boom. An hour and 56 minutes into it, she starts talking about redheads. You can fast forward. It comes with a certificate, pretty certificate you can hang on your wall. Unfortunately, right now, I am kind of ghetto. I don't have, my online store is not finished yet. I'm almost finished with it, where you're going to be able to just go and click and boom, there it is. Right now, they just got to inquire with me, send me an email, shoot me a DM, Instagram, Facebook, comment on my YouTube, whatever you want to do. I'm the only Taryn Quinterri in the whole world. Funny little story about that. So my mom, I would have been a Vodo. I was supposed to be Taryn Vodo. And my mom's great grandmother was the last of the Quinterris in Italy. And my mom wanted to keep her last name going. So she went and legally changed her last name before I was ever conceived. And this is back before the internet, and she didn't have a piece of mail handy. So she spelled the freaking last name wrong. So we are literally the only Taryn Quinterris in the whole world. She's missing an I. There's another I in there somewhere. Yeah. So I'm very easy to find. If you want to kill me, it's unfortunate because you'll find me very quickly. But for marketing purposes, it's great. So you guys can message me. I'll send you an invoice. You can Venmo me, Zelle. I take it, whatever, any kind of money. I'll take it.
I'll take it. Right? Crypto, you take crypto, all that good stuff.
I do. I take crypto too.
Nice. Yes. All right.
Yeah.
So one last question before we wrap it up, Taryn. I'm a new SMP artist. What advice do you have for me in respects to color theory?
Start out with carbon black. It is the most forgivable. It really is. It's also the one that will migrate the easiest. So you better make sure you do not go too deep, okay? But it is forgivable as far as lasers come. Don't work on any blondes or redheads for now. And I really don't think people should be doing women that are anyone darker than a dark brown should not have carbon. It's going to get cooler and cooler as we age. I'm sorry, white women, I should say. Tanner skins, they are, you can use carbon on them, but still, I really don't feel anybody who has like medium light to lighter hair, blonde, redhead, should have carbon black. I think you should stick with just darker hair colors for now and carbon black until you really get good at understanding different skin and depth and saturation. And then you can kind of graduate and learn color theory, and I'll be there for you. Or
right.
Steven.
Excellent.
Both of us.
Excellent advice. But now you just, you know, my spidey sense, I said that was the last question. Can I get you for two more? Okay.
Yeah.
So first you said, don't use carbon on dark hair women or dark skinned women. I just want to.
No, I said, so I said, I don't use carbon on any lighter hairs. So if they've got like dark brown hair like me, you could use carbon on me.
Okay.
In my opinion, I'm a little white for carbon. Like it might look cool over the years. I don't know, but you could, because I have darker hair. But if I had like a lighter brown hair or blonde or red, I wouldn't use carbon.
So you use an iron oxide.
I'm sorry, I wouldn't use carbon black. Sometimes I use carbon colors. Yeah, and sometimes
so
I
you
do
just
use
want to
iron
use
oxide.
carbon black. You for that instance, you would use carbon black with a modifier. Is that what you mean?
So, kinda. I don't use carbon black with for redheads and blondes ever. On some brunettes I do, and I'll put orange in it to make it brown, right? But I use pre-mixed colors. Like I've got brown, carbon browns that are pre-mixed from LI. So I like to use colors on colored hair.
Understood. So when you say carbon, you meant carbon black.
Carbon black. Yeah. Sorry about that.
Got you. Because that's where I was kind of like, wait a minute. So what do we use? Okay. So my second question is trichopigmentation, right? I hear it all the time. That's non-existent in the East Coast. I think there's one person who says the only clinic that does.
I think he's my student.
And, and he's down in the city. I did not know what the hell. I understood what was the difference. I saw the process and it looks almost like they were botching them. And it took for Damien one time.
Oh, maybe that's not my student then. My student does very good work.
No. I mean, like the process, it seems like it's too much pigment. Like it looks like it leaves a lot of remaining ink on the scalp before you wipe off. Not the overall complete.
Oh, it is a pain in the butt.
Like
so that's why a lot of people, that's why I tell them there's pros and cons to everything. Like so one of the reasons that I like to use pre-mixed colors on like light brunettes, blondes, redheads, so is because when you're using carbon black, you have to dilute it, right? And then you get it darker by layering it. Like the lighter the person's skin, the more you have to dilute. And then you've got to layer it and like get it darker and darker. At least that's what I do. That's how I was taught. I don't know. Everyone's different. Yeah, everyone's different. I believe that makes longer lasting results that look better long-term. They don't lead to that like kind of cloudy helmet that a lot of people get. So I use the pre-mixed colors on them because I don't have to dilute those. I'm mixing them to modify them and make each like custom color for each person, but they heal very true to color. This is talking about carbon colors, okay? Like your carbon browns and I'll throw a little orange in it to make it lighter, whatever, but you don't have to dilute them. They are made to like heal. And so for me, it's like they heal beautifully, and I'll do a session, and then the second session I go in and I just add more density and like, boom, it's beautiful. If I were to be working on, let's say a really white redhead, and I used carbon black, I would have to dilute it. Like, I don't know how you guys work, but like the pigment that I use, we do it by drops, right? I would have to do like 35 drops to one, and then it would heal so fucking light that I'm gonna have to go back there, and then I gotta put some more in, and then I gotta go back and I gotta find those same dots and put some more in. So if you're working on long hair, like I work on a lot of long hair, that is really hard to find those dots when they heal that light. A bald head, sure, I can see them, no problem. I could do that. I'm a big fan of layering. I teach it. But yeah, but the con to working with these premixed colors is that they are thick. Iron oxides and the carbon premix, they're all thick. So the trickle pigmentation, they're messier. I'm going through a lot more wipes. It's a pain in the ass. So people like the carbon, and I have taught people like, okay, listen, if you hate the premixed colors and you don't like having a mess and you want to use the carbon, that's fine. I'm going to teach you how to make a brown out of a carbon, but it's going to heal very light. Out of a carbon black. You're going to have to dilute the crap out of it. You got to add a little orange or a little red or whatever the case, the scenario is. And then you're going to have to layer it. You're going to have to get it darker by going in that same exact dot, which is very hard. And a lot of people don't like to do that. So there are pros and cons to both. Got you.
Outstanding. Yeah, it's such a, when it comes to that realm, is like, I can see why there's only two of you guys that really tap into it.
But that's changing. But people in Europe, they've been using colors forever. But people in Europe, so they use a lot of like iron oxides. This is our more like trickle pigmentation people. They use iron oxide premix colors. But because I think it has to do with like your climate. Even when I lived in Florida though, my trickle pigmentation clients lasted a lot longer than when I moved out to Arizona. I think because the sun is just ridiculously strong out here. So it was fading to iron oxides within 6 months, which was not okay. But in Europe, like their clients will last like 2 years before their ink starts fading and they need a touch up. So they're fine with iron oxides because iron oxides, there's a major benefit to using them if you're in the right climate with not a ton of sun. If they are able to last 2 years and then they start fading, guess what? They will fade away. So you're never going to have that helmet that you will have with SMP. There's bad helmets. That's a bad job, right? And then there's good helmets. That's how I explain it to my students, because they're like, well, what about this guy's work? I'm like, that's a helmet. That's a cloud, but it's a good helmet. And even I create a cloud sometimes, and this is where it gets crazy, depending if the person has a natural cloud. So back to that redhead, when he shaves his skin, he's got a blue cloud. So guess what? I'm not going to layer as much with the person. Right, with the person who you'd see nothing when he shaves, like he doesn't have any like undertone cloud showing. I'm gonna layer so freaking carefully that when he comes back for his touch up, a year or 2 years later, like I can still see skin. What I say when I'm talking about a cloud, I don't see any skin, and so many people think that's just the way it's supposed to look like. Okay, that's fine for now. Let me know how your cloud looks in 10 years. When you keep adding touch up after touch up after touch up after touch up, that ink, if you're using carbon inks, like it is going to make a helmet, and that helmet will only get worse and worse. But hopefully over time, you just stop needing touch-ups, right? That's the idea with carbon, is like at some point, like you're not gonna need any touch-up. There's not gonna be any more place to put ink.
It's gonna look like you got a hat on.
Full of apples, right? And that's okay though, because like I said, there's some good clouds. If like good SMP artists, they create good clouds. I know how to create a cloud on a client who needs a cloud, and then there's other people who shouldn't have a cloud, and it's not gonna look good. And then if you're not diluting enough, and there's just so many different ways, but I'm gonna tell you right now, it is gonna grow. People are starting to open up their minds, and people are starting to know how to research, because this is such a well-known thing now. There are always going to be clients who don't know how to research and clients who do. So you got to understand how to offer everything. So all of you are going to have to expand your knowledge, myself included. We're still evolving. Like, it's just, it's an ever-growing industry, just like anything. If we look at how brows looked even 4 years ago, they're disgusting compared to the brows now, like the techniques.
Yeah, so, for sure. And I'm sure, as we keep progressing more and more, whether it be pigment, needles, things are going to be afforded to us to make things a little easier for us and not be so scientific where you're just like, oh my God, I don't know what this is. I'm just not going to do it. But I appreciate you taking out the time to break it down for us, because a lot of us just genuinely don't know. We lack that information. We're ignorant to it. So before I go, though, this is not a question. This is a request. Let everybody know where they can find you, Taryn, website, social media, all that good stuff, please.
Yeah. So my website, it's a long one, but it's www.cosmetic-aesthetics with an A. Aesthetics is plural, cosmetic is singular.com. My Instagram is @cosmetic_aesthetics. And then you can find me, like I said, Taryn Quinterri, TarynQuinterri. You can find me on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. I'm the only one in the whole world, so I'm really not hard to find. And I do answer people comment on my little YouTube videos all the time. They ask questions and I will write back. So you can find me like that.
Outstanding. Awesome. Taryn, again, I appreciate you and thank you for coming on the podcast, dropping some gems for us, because I too got some education out of this, and I appreciate you. And that's going to wrap it up for this episode of the Scalp Solutions podcast. Until the next time.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.